If you're considering sanding and resealing your existing engineered oak, then you got to watch this video because we're going to get into the detail with Dave Waddy from Zimbo's on the essential points to note when you are considering this practice. Welcome.
Barry, thanks very much. I think with the amount of engineered oak floors going down these days, there's a lot of engineered floors going down. And that means within a certain period of time, you're going to need to resand and reseal that floor.
Absolutely.
And of course, with your engineered floor, we all know that there is a veneer of oak on the top. So this becomes a lot more tricky when you are resanding this floor. You've got more things to look out for. And I think this is where the consumer needs to think a little bit and make some informed decisions when working out who is going to do the work with the sanding and sealing.
Absolutely. You know, you got those different thicknesses and some can handle a gentle sand or abrasion on the surface. And others have got a lot more meat where you can really dig into them and, you've got material to play with. And this is quite an important consideration when you're looking at like the hand scraped, wire brushed, or the micro bevels. These are all potentially elements that are going to be impacted by the servicing of your floor.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. A lot of people don't understand that, for instance, if it's a hand-scraped floor or brushed floor, once you've sanded that with a big machine, you're obviously going to remove that appearance on the surface. So that
texture.
That texture is gone. So that's the first thing to consider. Secondly, the micro bevel between the boards, so that's a little groove that goes between the boards, that will also be affected. And depending on what machine the sanding and sealing team is using, this can affect it less or more, because if they don't know what they're doing, they're going to be taking off more wood than perhaps they should.
Well, I think I've seen this in the past where, you go and hire a machine from your local hire-it store, and they don't necessarily work on those machines every day, and they take away a lot of that top layer of oak, which is basically, that's your investment that's ending up in dust out the back door. And it gets quite scary at times.
Yes, I think so. And I think also the other thing is that when you invite quotes, you should also be asking people that are in the know who can then make a decision. Some of the time, you don't have to do a full sand and seal. These days, we have nets that come out of Germany or out of various parts of the world, but it literally gives a very light sand to the surface, and then you can apply normally a two-component product, like a two-component varnish on top, if it's a varnished or UV-coated floor. So there are possibilities where you don't have to do a full sand and seal. So that option should be explored prior to you going all the way and literally sanding all the product off. So that means you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing, who can make an informed decision and say to you, yes, sir, I can or I can't do what you need or what you desire with either with sanding or just with a very light buff and then a recoat.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if you're wanting to just refresh your existing visual, you're basically just gently abrading the surface so that your new coating can lock into that texture that you've created versus totally removing all the color, all the texture, and almost starting anew.
That's absolutely right. So in the instance where you're giving this light buff, you're essentially just keying the surface for the product that's going to stick on top of it. I think that normally the critical factors are your scratches and marks. How deep are they?
Yes.
So if the scratches have gone literally through the coating, or if your stains or the marks have gone through the coatings, then you're in trouble. Then you're heading towards a full sand and seal. And then what you've got to do is you've got to ensure that the company that is doing this for you starts with as light a grit as possible. Okay. You don't want to be going to a 36 grit, which is a very heavy-duty sand. What you want to be doing is trying to take off as little as possible.
Yes.
But you will have to take off all the coating.
Fully understand that.
And particularly if you're going to stain. If you're going to stain, the color goes into the wood.
Yes.
So you're going to have to remove all of the coating so that the stain can penetrate the wood.
So the stain can penetrate the wood evenly, otherwise you're going to get blotches.
Correct. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
So that is essential. And then you also have to understand that the brushing, the hand scraping, those are
Gone.
are gone. Exactly. So, say hello to a new looking floor. Different looking floor, but yeah.
That also provides opportunities and opportunity to change things up. All right, when we start talking about a scratch pattern, all right, we're looking at sanding the floors. We have to follow various sequences to get the best end result. And you've got some machinery that delivers a quality end result. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're the agents for Legler in Germany. Legler are one of the oldest sanding machinery companies, and they have various machines. They have a belt sander. They have an edge sander for the edge of your floors. So they have various options, but the essential thing is that they are absolutely precise. They're very durable, and over a long period of time, they're going to keep a stable and absolutely consistent sanding procedure. And that's what you want. You don't want a sanding machine that is going to give you variation.
So the way that I can best explain this, that when you're sanding a floor and it's kind of like digging into one side, it can give you a variable end result. And the balance and the engineering that goes into these machines, that they can deliver a well-balanced and even service over multiple years is where we want to be. And that's your Lagla has a history in developing these machines that they constantly deliver a banked end result.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, of course, is dust. So dust is a huge thing in the home. So these machines are also, I won't say dust-free, dust-reduced. Probably 95% of the dust is eliminated. They all have vacuums on. They're well designed, so the dust is picked up and goes into a bag. So from a homeowner's point of view, understanding the machine that is going to be doing the work in your home also affects you from a health perspective and from a visual. So it's both.
So we want to be exploring contractors that have suitable and quality machines and that they have the skills to be able to drive them accordingly.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head.
All right, Dave, we know a little bit about these machines. What is the actual process that you should be following as a sand and reseal contractor?
Okay, so what we would basically look at is firstly, what is the minimum grit that we can get away with on the floor to take away as least amount of wood or to get rid of that coating. So you would start at arguably 100 grit, something like that on an engineered floor, and see if that works. If that doesn't work, you go to an 80 grit.
Understood. So you're not starting low.
Start low.
You start high and then bring it back.
So once you've worked out what grit you're going to do, that grit is then used consistently over the whole surface. You have the big belt sanding machine, which is used on the main part of the floor. And then we have a little thing called an edger, which can go right up to the skirtings and used on your staircase.
Around the toilet bowl or whatever.
That's right. So that is, the process is a combination of the belt sander and the edger.
Understood.
And also, if you are restaining with a dark stain particularly, it's critical that the sanding process goes from one grit to the other, finer, because any scratches in the surface are highlighted by a dark stain. So if you're going to stain your floor black or dark brown and the contractor has left scratch marks in the wood, that is just absolutely
going to jar. You're going to see those scratch patterns in the end result.
Yes, absolutely. So the actual sanding is critical, and normally what we do for the final sand, you will then use the edger first and then take your belt sander as close to the wall as possible, because quite often, particularly dark staining, the transition between the edging machine and the belt sand is noticeable. So you want to minimize that.
All right. So from my limited understanding, when you're working through the different grits, are you going through every grit rating, or do you skip an alternate one depending on the type of finish that you do?
If you look at Legler's recommendation, they have a great website, actually. The Legler website have got downloads, but they recommend that you, once you start at, say, 80, you would then go 100, and then you go to 120. Obviously, you stop on the grit that you're comfortable with. You don't always have to go to 150, which is very fine, but I'd say your minimum would be 100 or 120. You wouldn't go less than that.
So you also want to have the surface where it's receptive enough to your coating. Otherwise, if you go too high, you could burnish the floor or burnish components of the floor that could impact how the coating is bonded to the substrate.
It's more actually, funny enough, in terms of staining. The finer the grit, the more you close the surface.
Well, yeah, that. The technical.
Yes. So at the end of the day, normally we will, if you just clear coating, you can go nice and fine to 150.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
If you dark staining and you want the floor to be nice and dark,
Yes.
you would probably stop one short, because then the floor takes in more color.
So similar results to maybe water popping, or
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so water popping is where at a stage you would actually get a mist sprayer and just apply a moisture layer to the surface, which allows the fibers just to open up, swell up. That dries off very quickly, and now your surface is a lot more receptive to your stain.
That's exactly right. It's the same process.
Same process.
Same. One's mechanical, yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. And where a good contractor versus maybe somebody who doesn't have as much knowledge or skill, or is maybe trying to cut costs, that's where they would be skipping sanding grit levels in between those variable stages.
Yes, and what that means is it leaves scratches from the previous grit behind. So that's essentially what happens. If you skip processes, you will have scratches from your prior harder or
more aggressive grit. All right, final question on very thin veneer type engineered oaks. They're looking at like a 1.5 down to 0.6. Are these types of floors serviceable, or do we need to replace the floor?
I don't think you can put a big sanding machine on those floors, no. So the only scenario, if you're down to 1.5 mil, the only scenario you've got is to use what we term the sanding net.
Yep.
And then you are going to literally have to give it a very light sand. So you're only talking about dealing with the coating.
Keying it in
the coating and then putting
refresher
coat. Aside from that, you cannot put a belt sander on there, because if there's slightly height variation due to your screed being slightly out, it'll go straight through down to the
core,
the ply, to the core.
All right. So these are great points to consider when you are investing in your engineered floor, or when you are looking to refresh your engineered wood floor.
Yeah, I mean, that is right. I mean, from my own point of view, I wouldn't be going much less than 2.5, 3 mil if I was purchasing a floor, but it depends on your end purpose. But if you're going to buy something with a very thin veneer, you just need to understand that your options are limited in terms of rejuvenating that floor.
Which is fine. You know, there's a product for every purpose. And obviously, the thinner the veneer, the cheaper the product is. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio again. We really appreciate you advising us and helping us safeguard our future floor investments.
It's an absolute pleasure. And guys, don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you like this video, which I'm sure you will.
Excellent. Thank you.